Whatever. All right, look, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can start with the formal YouTube intro. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. I hope you're doing well. And we are about to embark on an exclusive conversation with the one, the only multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, producer extraordinaire, Jack Antonoff of Bleachers fame. Take the Sadness Out of Saturday Night is the brand new record. It is coming out soon. We're going to be having this conversation. Before it, talking about that and a whole lot more, Jack, thank you for coming through. Are you excited for this new LP to drop?
Beyond, but have also slipped into that it's actually coming out, bottled up a 3-year conversation. Now I'm just throwing it out in the world. Mm-hmm. It's a lot. I was just telling someone, it's weird to have moments in your life where you're like, how many of these do I get? What, 5? 10? It's real intense, but really, really excited and proud.
I mean, I think there's still time. Ask Bob Dylan. I mean, he's got a huge catalog,
Yeah, but he's so rare. And how many people, I think Rough and Rowdy Ways is one of his best albums to still be making great work. But yeah, it's just you're here, you're at that moment that you thought about, and you're filled with a lot of things that you'll be examining for a while.
Okay. So, this record is literally going to be out in a matter of hours, considering that. And I do have some other questions, but to begin on the record more broadly, like, is there anything about the album, its general concepts, or the sound that you're going for here that you might want to, I guess, not warn people about, but give people an idea of before they go into it? So maybe they know what to expect, so nobody's kind of taken off guard, I guess.
Well, it's a bit darker than, I don't know. I sort of broaden my entire spectrum. It's darker and it's filled with more joy at the same time. It's an album about wanting to enter the next phase of your life and the wild frustration of not being able to. And standing right there, and you see it, but you can't have it. And it's filled with all the joy of seeing it and all the devastation of not being able to have it. That's this Saturday night to me is what's the most open concept in the world, where anything can happen, where nothing matters. It's Saturday night. And for some of us, hope and openness takes sadness with it. I've been one of those people. I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's a Jewish thing. I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I don't know if it's things I've experienced in my life, but I see a lot of other people out in the world who have that too. And that's what this album is examining that. What happens if you do that? This evil eye, songs like How Dare You Want More. Take the Sadness Out of Saturday Night. It's really a question. What happens? It's something that I've been, and then where do you put that unearned hope? These are the general themes, but they're really just kind of me fucking with my parents and talking a lot of shit about how they did it.
I mean, digging into some of the lyrics on the record, there were portions where it seemed like you were going into some personal stuff, and almost even like some dirty laundry that might involve other people as well. And like, in that process, are there experiences or ideas that you're sharing in those moments that, you have to kind of stop yourself when writing and being like, do I want to say that? Do I want to share that? Do I want to express that on a track and kind of broadcast it out to the world?
No, because I think what's magical about songs is, and it's not a tool. It's not a lie. You're talking about someone. You're really talking about yourself. You're talking about someone. You're really talking about someone as through the lens of all the someones like that. Songs are so hyper specific and kind of about everything all at once. It's a bit of like a tell me how you really feel anytime I hear a song. And so I do feel licensed. I'm not out here naming names, but that's sort of what I do. That's the trade that I work in, is to get as close to the bone and make sense of that within a song and then an album. There's a danger to that. I've had some complicated relationships in my life.
What was generally like, I guess, your process and your workflow for this record? Because obviously you're a famously busy guy, and a lot of people, including myself out there, wonder, after you've worked on all of these records with other artists, like, how do you find the time to do your own stuff? Do you give yourself the same, what I would imagine, like uninterrupted focus and studio time and everything to complete your own work? Or do you have to kind of do it in chunks? It's sometimes.
No, I do everything. it's not that I resent the idea of being labeled as busy. It's more just like slightly unrecognizable to me because things stack up in a funny way, and they leave this impression that like everything's coming out, but you know, things are sort of moving for years, and like records, these like strange process where you work on it, and there's like this like A section where you're trying shit on, and you're, whether it's my records, something I'm working on with someone, and then there's a moment where you hear it and you see it, and you launch into this new phase of chasing it. My whole life, I've written songs and performed them and made records with friends, which I guess now we call producing, but at the time it was sort of this collaboration. So there's no thing that is like, oh, I'm being pulled away from here, I'm being pulled away from there. I think my life is a lot more loose than it might seem. You know, I'm working on this, and then I'll speak to someone who'll be like, oh, let's go somewhere for a couple of days and work on that. Like, these things are just moving, and if they're important, then they snowball. And if they're not, they die. And I think that's look, you find these relationships, whether it's with yourself or other people, that sort of breed more and more life. And you can be amazed at what you can do if you're doing shit that you really love. And you can be amazed at how little you do if you're trying shit that you don't like.
No, I mean, just to further illustrate that outsider perspective from my own view, you know, I mean, what you say, having had conversations with other producers, is completely true. I mean, there can be that perception that you've changed your sound, or you're just working so much, or you're doing this or you're doing that, depending on how the succession of albums that you've worked on have been released, or, you know, when they're being out, and, you know, who they're out with. But, you know,
and you can't wait. And it's a funny thing to deal with. And it's just part of it, because there's the making of something, and you cannot never clock how long something's going to take. You have all these hopes and dreams about what an album is. Bleachers albums take me a while. And it's not for, you know, I work on them every day. I'm usually chipping away at pretty big concepts, and they just take me a while to hear the thing that I need to hear to feel like I've achieved what I'm imagining. And I had one of these moments in 2017 where a bunch of things stacked up, and everyone was like, "Oh, how do you do it all?" I was like, "Oh, they're all sort of moving. They're like different planets moving around, and every once in a while they knock into each other or some shit."
Or they're all aligning at a certain point.
That's a much better version, but
we're crashing into each other is kind of epic too. You know, that makes a much better movie. But like, I guess with that being said, like, as somebody who's always, you know, reviewing records and listening to records and diving into the liner notes and everything, and seeing you constantly, you know, there is almost like an omnipresence sometimes about what you do, and that has to, at least to some degree, be attributed to some kind of work ethic. No.
I have a pretty intense work ethic. I'm definitely a maniac, but I don't know. I feel like it's more about the quality of the albums. Like that they, you know, a lot of albums come out. I don't know. I've just felt very like just hyper focused the past couple of years. I don't know how to do it any other way. I would never work on something I didn't feel. And I've gotten lucky with some of the collaborations in my life where they're just these relationships where there's a lot to discover.
You know, for you personally, as you're kind of moving creatively from your own work to other projects as well, do you see that all as being a part of like one continual flow that you're not necessarily like switching gears in, or do you have to creatively compartmentalize certain songs and certain projects so that things don't cross over? What you're kind of working on, the outcome is more accurate to what you want or what someone else wants, or...
They're hyper. I mean, one question that the one huge misconception about me is sometimes, you know, I'll notice in interviews, people will be like, "How do you decide what's a Bleacher song and what's something else?"
Sure.
So I've never written a song and given it someone.
Sure.
I think I did it like once or twice, but nothing to write home about. And that's not a knock on that. That's a beautiful gift. Like Diane Warren can sit down and write a song, and it's like this, you know, chuck it out there into the world, and it's so and so's biggest song. It's not what I do. If I write a song, it's mine. And it's my story, and it's for me and my audience. If I work with someone else, it's about lifting them up and being on the journey with them to crystallize this thing that we see together. And I could write stuff with them, but it's not going to be the story. I could write music or something like that. So that it's not like there's you know, like a folder on my computer and like things get like chucked out in different places. They're all sort of their own planets. And they're just like weird because they're such similar process. It's such a similar process, but it's so different. whether I'm alone or whether I'm with this person or that person. I get obsessed with the universe theory because I see them like different planets where it's like, sure, they're round, but no.
As a producer and as a player, and I guess as a writer as well, are there any kind of general rules of thumb or kind of philosophies that you approach these sessions with, that no matter who you're working with or what direction a sound might be going in, you can kind of hold on to this idea or that idea to kind of carry you through, or, you know, maybe something is kind of like a basic rule of thumb that kind of functions no matter what context that you're in?
I got this North Star theory that weighs pretty heavy on me, which is like, you know, the heart of collaboration is it's not 1 + 1 = 2, right? How many records have you listened to where there's this great producer, this artist, this person, all these things add up to a giant zero, you know? It's people who see the same thing. And making a record is like a crazy mountain. So it's like, I like this idea of like, there's a thing. And this is the moment, whether it's someone producing Bleacher stuff or if I'm working with someone else, where I feel like there's that click and you're like, we can take this journey together. You're discussing something that's very hard to discuss and often just a feeling or a sound. And it's distant. But if you both see it and the people involved in the project see it, then you just spend every day inching towards it until it's like a little less unattainable. And all of a sudden, one day you find yourself at this place that seemed impossible. But I'm obsessed with the idea of making sure everyone in the room or involved is looking at the same thing, because I think really bad work happens when really great people get together but are seeing different things, because then it's just going to be a lot of that instead of this continuous journey.
And does that mean when you're going into a project that there has to be some kind of like hard or semi-hard conceptualization of what it is before it's done in a way?
It's more like a feeling. And it's so funny, like thinking back on some of those conversations about, you know, like even now with the Bleachers record, like I can finally contextualize it. I have all these buzzwords like unearned hope, take the Santa Saturday night. But at the time, it's just these like feelings that are so terrifying and interesting to you. And you're interested in them because you don't know them. And so you want to write about them. And then those feelings inform sounds and ideas and just emotions, like loose shit. Like, I want the band to feel like they're about to fly off a cliff, but they never do. And these like loose concepts, not like it's gonna be a Lindrum with this sound and this reverb. And it's always that kind of fumbling around your words. I know it when I'm talking about it. I know it when someone else is talking about it. And you know when two people are having this conversation that's beyond words, right? You're having a conversation where you're saying these, like, it's almost like you're doing like charades or something. You're like trying to fucking say anything that'll lead to this thing that there's no words for. And then you just feel it. And that's the moment when you say like, all right, we're going to take this journey together, because it's a real crazy journey. And it's a real guttural one.
On this new record, you have a few collaborations as well, since we're, you know, on that topic. You know, considering the position that you're often in as a co-writer and as a producer, what was sort of that process like for you to kind of almost like turn those tables a bit and have on the other side of the table Bruce Springsteen, obviously, one of your greatest influences, and obviously...
Are you a Bruce person?
I'm a Bruce person, as opposed to a Billy Joel person?
No, just I feel like Bruce is much like Dylan or Joni Mitchell, Miles Davis hit this point. You know, they're different than Andre, Frank, or Fiona Apple, where it's like we all know it's great, but then there's those of us who are really there listening. You know, that's what I mean by that. No offense to Billy Joel.
Yeah. I just say that because I've been asked that question before, so I didn't know if that was if
that's like Beatles or Stones. Like, how are we asking that question?
Sure.
It's so missing the point of all things. Without, I'm not saying anything bad about anyone. It's just such a bizarre question to me. So you are.
But Bruce Springsteen, yes, to the point where I've had to explain maybe some portions of his songs or catalog that might not have aged perfectly in order for, you know, to some people, in order for other people to get them. But yes, absolutely. He's
as advertised. He's the best, you know, and you reach this level of artistry and you recognize it both as a fan, and if you're ever in a situation where you get to know these people or work with them, where you sort of crest out of competition and you're just expressing yourself in this very high form. As a few people I feel that way about, and he's very clearly one of them. And working with him is fucking profound because he's flowing through me regardless. You know, you grow up and there's lots of things you love. I remember hearing the Beatles and Joni Mitchell and Miles Davis, some of these people, and it was like all the colors in the world coming alive, right? But then I remember hearing Bruce around the same time that I was starting to hear a lot of local music coming out of New Jersey, and I was like, this is not just the landscapes I recognize, but this feeling, this crazy feeling of being from this place that I don't have words for, but this is it. This is the sound. And it felt like strength. It felt like there was value there. And it felt like, and from that moment on, I kind of cut this shit of pretending I was in the New York band. I was kind of a young teenager at the time. Strokes were happening. I wanted to be a part of this thing that I just wasn't, and found this identity, which is my identity of, you know, the culture of where you're from is sometimes a place that everyone wants to run from. And that's a sound. New York music, bluntly put, is reporting from the center of the world. The fucking first Strokes album is literally called "Is This It?" ? Think about the Velvet Underground. And now contrast that with not just suburban music, but New Jersey music right outside the party. Literally medieval. That is such a powerful place to live in, this like forgotten place. It's filled with darkness, it's filled with hope. I recognize it in myself. And so then when I heard it, I recognized this seed of a thing. And then it's a torch I wanted to carry. Cut to all these years later, writing a song that I would never have even written without the influence of someone like Bruce, let alone have him sing on it. It's extremely powerful, and it makes me just really, really proud.
So to kind of put a pin in it, like Bruce's music at a certain age, like turned you into a proud New Jerseyan, and there was like some kind of New Jersey centric DNA in it that you felt.
Oh yeah. He did that for a lot of us, you know, because to not just say like, oh, we have the best bagels, or like Sopranos the best show ever, but to literally take the shittiness, take the darkness, like of this whole, like, we got to get away from here and make it the culture. He's the architect of that. You know, it's not like, you don't understand, there's beautiful farms, fuck you, we have beaches and mountains. It's literally, I won't die here. I mean, think about Bruce lyrics. Well, you know, I won't die here. I got to get out and know that he's still there, and that and to express glory from that perspective, which I finally see. It's so much cooler, in my opinion, to fucking want and hope and not think you're at the center of the world than I would raise kids right outside New York City any day.
No, it makes me think about just generally being from a state as well that a lot of musicians have escaped from, and, you know, they go off to other states to sort of start successful music careers, or even musicians who, in a way, like fake the geographical funk. I was sort of conflicted.
It's so unattractive.
Well, I was.
You are where you come from. It's your culture. You think about every place in the world. If I say Atlanta, if I say Tokyo, if I say New Jersey, if I say San Francisco, there's amazing music that's flying through your head. No,
it's true. I'm just saying, like, recently, just as a music fan myself, like, I was confronted with, and I'd never looked into this before, I was confronted with the fact that I guess, like, I guess CCR is just like from just outside of Berkeley. Like they weren't born down by the bayou, and like, and listening to their music, and like, look, if you look up something, you know, as goofy a term as swamp rock is, it is supposed to be local to a certain area. But when you look up, like, when you look up lists of albums that are like parading that music, it's like, yeah, CCR, they're the best band bringing that Louisiana sound. And it's like, but
country deals with us all the time.
Yeah,
it's like,
it's true.
I mean, it seems like they'll let any motherfucker in who just like jumps into the vibe. Like, they don't care where you're. There's some real city folks in there.
but yeah, I mean, I guess, like, I feel like there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, that are really insecure about where they're from, and they're wrestling with the idea of being from a really uncool place, and they can't. I guess they can't find the heart of creativity to find any worth in that, or find anything worth saying about that. I don't know.
I totally agree, and I've recognized that in myself through the years, this like wanting to get away from something, but it's the same part of you that look, you only have yourself and your soul, right? So when you're making work, it's the only thing you can draw on as your guiding light. Does this sound like me wherever I am? Does it sound like where I'm going? You know, so a really good way to do that is like make a fucking hard investment into the actual landscape you're from.
I also wanted to ask you quickly about the Lana appearance on the record as well. I mean, obviously you've worked with a lot of artists.
Yeah, she's the best, right?
I mean, you've worked with a lot of artists over the years. I'm sure you know, and some you've collaborated with on your own tracks that we haven't heard possibly, around this album cycle. But I mean, you know, fill us in a little bit about this track and what you felt like, you know, you had in mind for it and what Lana brought to it and why, you know, it needed to go in the direction that it did for it to be what it is.
So I saw it as it's a love song. It's a song called Big Life and a song called Secret Life, and they're kind of knocking at each other as different sides of the coin. Secret Life, I was thinking maybe it could be a duet, and then I was like, nah, it's not really a duet. I'm just sort of having this personal plea that I want from a partner. But then I was like, I mean, we were just messing around in the studio, and she sang a little bit on it, and then I heard this voice, and I thought, well, if I kind of stack her and drench it in reverb, she can like sort of be like this idea, like this like sort of dream of the girl you're talking about. Like she could represent kind of all love or whatever. And because it almost feels like I'm so dry in the song, my tone is so dry, and she's so verbed out and kind of all over the place, and I'm kind of tight and mono, and she's swirling all over the place. It sounds like I'm dreaming of her, and it just made me feel like it was like another color in the song that thrilled me. Ironically, she sings on that, but wrote a song called "Don't Go Dark with Me." It's a real cool studio moment, because I think back then we were actually working on Norman. We were finishing that, and I was just talking about something. We were talking about some relationship shit, and I was like, I have this fucking lyric and I can't get it right. And it was just this weird moment that happens so rarely, where it's this reversal. And I was like, you know, you run with I was talking about, like, it's not a love song, it's not a hate song, it's like, you gotta fucking leave me alone song. Which is a very funny place for me to be, and actually makes me feel kind of ugly. So I was like, run with the wild, cry on my shoulder like a little child. And I was like saying, like, you know, like just like do what you want, like don't go dark on me. And I remember she was like you know, vaping one night. She's like, that's it. And I never would have gotten there. Like, you need that. And it's a very quintessential role sometimes of just that person who's like, no, stop. Like, that's it. You just said it. Don't think about finding some deeper, more intellectualized, poetic way to say it. Like, that's a great lyric. And hearing it through her eyes, I was like, that is a great lyric. Then we got on Juno and we worked it out and kind of wrote it like a country song. And, you know, it's not like that at all. Yeah, just these weird moments where it's like we were so focused on Norman, but then through a conversation, this song kind of just happened. And I just like wrapped my arms around it. And I'm like, oh, you helped me birth that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way music is kind of presented and marketed to people, a song and the creative process just seems like such a singular thing. And I think a lot of the audience doesn't really appreciate how much of a communicative act that, you know, making any kind of art is or can be, especially music. And, you know, as you were just kind of displaying there, like writing that track just seemed like a conversation, you know, or there was a conversation that needed to happen in order for that track to be.
I think what's so crazy and what's so obnoxious and terrifying about this work is that sometimes it's a conversation, sometimes it's a year of working on something, sometimes it's a giant thing, sometimes it's a tiny thing, sometimes it's a voice note, sometimes it's a track. That's why so many people in this line of work just like present with such ego, because they can't do the thing that they do. You know, like, you can't sit down and write a song and have any magic in it. It just comes to you or it doesn't. And it's really weird to be in a trade where you can't, every time you write a song, it might be your last one. History proves that. You know, it drifts out of you. And I think you make a choice at some point where you're either like, all right, I'm just going to live in that and kind of like fucking pray at the altar of it, or I'm going to say, like, I got the sauce, I'm the guy.
You know, something I got a sense of listening to your records especially, but also just kind of having this conversation with you. Not only do you come off as just an artist, a writer, producer, but a really huge fan of just the art form of music as well. And there are a lot of great musicians out there who, at least from the way that they outwardly present, don't necessarily like broadcast to the world how huge of a fan they are of music or certain artists or certain sounds. And
that always bothers me because it's a way of life that we're living in. And it's like being online for a club and talking and being like, I don't even want to go here. It's like, you would not, it's like when people talk shit about touring or something, you're like, you're lying. You wouldn't be here. It does too much to your body. It gets too hard. It's not easy. Like, I could watch a TV show on my couch while I'm eating dinner and talk shit, because the price of entry is nothing. But if you go see a fucking band or someone's making a record, they fucking love it because there's no reason for them to be there. And it just really fucks up your personal relationships. It's really intense. Like, and so it always feels like such a weird thing it's like a weird cynicism to put on your audience. And that's I don't know. That's the one thing that can really just like bug me sometimes when I see it out there.
I mean, would you say as a result of that just being a fan is kind of a part of your identity, just on an individual level?
I wouldn't say fan. I would say I just love there's a language to this, and we all speak it in a different way. Like some of it through it's not like it or dislike. It's a way of life. Like I've always had kind of music is the only thing that's like made me recognize myself or feel myself. Everything else is like there's trapdoors everywhere. Music is no, it's just like it's in me. It's in a lot of people I know, and it's how we speak and it's how we function. So
I mean,
I don't know.
Another thing that makes that just kind of come to mind for me is that listening to Bleachers tracks over the years and listening to this new record prior to its release, I mean, it really kind of solidified this feeling that when I'm hearing a lot of your tracks, especially the ones that resonate with me the most, it really feels like, and not in like an insulting or derivative way, but like you're really indulging in a certain sound from a certain era, and like you're making it come alive in an exciting way that, as somebody who's also like a child of the 80s, I mean, I feel like, man, I just like really remember a fucking time when, pop music from New York used to sound this way, or something like from this era used to sound this way. And, you're almost like making it come to life again in a really like exciting way that sounds like it's brand new, like all just kind of reborn.
It is to me. I mean, you make shit that you don't hear out there. Like if someone does something and you love it, your reaction shouldn't be to make it. It should be to throw them a high five. You make things that you wish you heard out there. And there's a lot of sounds in me, and they change all the time. But I think the thing you're touching on is really just like, it's like a lack of cynicism. Like, I just think it's like clinging at light or something, and that's kind of, you're looking for those sounds. They change a lot to me. To me, they're, I don't know. I'm not sure what I sound like. I just kind of know when I hear it.
So let me start to get into some viewer questions if you're, fine with doing that kind of transitioning into that. I got a few specific ones that I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask, because they were just like super specific questions about like particular Bleachers lore, I guess. One of them was, I guess, the transition, like art-wise, that you made on this new record. Was there anything that kind of fed into, I guess, your transition away from like the black and white, the grayscale on this new record cover? And further beyond that, like, what is sort of the origin of the red dot on your last LP?
The red dot one, the fan theories are, well, I'll tell you in a sec, but the first time someone's asked me about this, and then I thought about it a lot, is the first album that I don't spend the whole time basically talking about. My sister died when I was 18, and it's anyone who knows anything about grief or loss, which we all do, it grows and it grows and it grows, and it changes, and it's a lens in which you see things. It's not something you move on past. It's the first album that I'm not specifically just relitigating that experience. And so I wanted to be in color, quite simply. On Strange Desire, it was really about loss and grief, and I wanted to be seen there, but gone. Gone now, the idea of that cover is that I was dead. I was like, what would it look like if I wasn't here anymore? And to kind of make it almost a little absurd. And it's the first album. And one of the big themes of this album, I started writing, and I was going a lot of the similar places of just, okay, now I'm at this age and I'm dealing with this loss still. And I wasn't feeling right. I know how to write those songs. It wasn't scaring me. And then I realized this thing, which opened my eyes and actually made me see the cover, whatever it was going to be, not in black and white, which was when you have a horrible tragedy, no one tells you that about this thing that can happen, which is that you can use it as a catch-all. And I'm not saying that's one of the most massive things, life-changing, I'll carry with me forever. But there's reasons that I'm fucked up that don't have to do with that. And when something like that happens, especially to formative age, then everything gets kicked under that rug. This is why I'm bad at relationships. This is why I have panic attacks. This is this, all under that rug. And you become like a genius in a language of grief, but you become an infant in this other area of actually understanding yourself outside of it. And that's really a big part of what this album is about. You know, me trying to knock into another phase of my life. And it's not all because I had this loss. That's colored my entire life, but there's other questions worth asking. So this album is about being alive. It's about finding some joy within all this shit. And I just always saw the cover in color. Not that it's the most colorful cover, but in my world, it's a big jump to go from black and white to even shades of blue.
No, I agree. That and the close up and what you said there in a way I feel like even is distilled on Stop Making This Hurt. You know, I mean, just like, you know, not even, you know, sort of the personal experiences that, you know, you're talking about there, but, you know, kind of the general social sourness of the world at large seems to kind of be influencing your writing on that track as well.
Deeply. I mean, we've clung so hard to hatred of oneself and pulling ourselves down and down and down because there's so much shame. Shame is just swirling around. You see it everywhere. And it's fucking boring because nothing comes from it. And it's why Trump is boring, which is a crazy thing to say, but he is. He doesn't grow. This is why we're so, you know, we were angry and all these things the past couple of years, but we were actually bored also because nothing comes from that. Think about it. We were. Can you imagine what it would fucking feel like if Trump got on TV one day and was like, I've been thinking about my father and how fucking small he made me feel, or just went somewhere else. Your mind it's boring. It's dressed up as shocking. And so I think we've lived in this cultural boredom. Look, all there is in life is growth, right? There's nothing else. It's all those cliches.
I mean, you know, to even get a little slightly sociological about it, I feel like a lot of people have been locked into a place of forced boredom when you're talking about stagnating or falling wages as a result of inflation, work hours increasing, isolation, social media, lack of human connection, lack of personal time, lack of...
And on top of all that, tech systems that feed you things you already fucking know.
Or just things that you hate.
Oh, but things that they know you already know. It's a total reduction of humanity. You walk in, you know, think about the things that have changed your life the most. You know, it's like, it's not like you bought a fucking No Effects record and you loved it, and then you bought a Lagwagon record and that changed your life the most. That's all in the same world. Jesus Christ, you fucking hear Joni Mitchell's Blue after you've been listening to No Effects and your life fucking changes. But the algorithm isn't going to feed you that. And it's causing a lot of depression and a lot of boredom because we've sucked out the part of like, well, maybe so-and-so who keeps buying milk actually wants soda, you know, and that's all the excitement in life. And that's what that fucking song is about. I was just looking around. I was like talking about my father, my mother, Daniel, Jimmy, who's actually Lana, all these people in my life and all this shit that's getting thrown at them. And it just made me want to like, stop making this hurt. Say goodbye like you mean it. Which is my way of just saying like, let's just drop this shit. It's kind of a petulant song.
No, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, and you know, I'm not coming on here to suck my own dick, obviously, but I feel like I will live on Twitch. But it's that's also what I think, you know, is kind of the answer whenever I might get the question about like, oh, you know, what's the point of a music reviewer in 2021 or whatever, and you know, not just to like boil this down to me, because there's a lot of people doing music oriented content online, but like if you're allowing a human to engage in that process of like diving into things, recommending things, like trying to pull gems from out of the dirt or whatever, like you're going to get like opinions that you disagree with and opinions that you find maybe a little coarse sometimes or whatever. But like through that process, you're going to get anomalies and records that may blow your mind that the algorithm's never going to hand you, because the algorithm is just going to send you and just give you what exactly it knows you're going to like. It's going to send you Joy Division and 50 other fucking bands that sound like Joy Division because it knows that you like that sound, and it's not going to throw you. So it's not going to throw you for a loop. Whereas like, you know, a person could.
Totally. And it's why I think there's still a future in radio. If it sort of goes back to the way it was, it's why I think that, look, we're all dealing with this. It's like, you know, 100 million songs in your pocket sometimes feels like zero. Because what do I do? Have you ever like opened your streaming service and you're like have this weird pause where you're not even sure what to listen to? I never get that when I'm talking to someone or when I'm around records or stuff like that. Like, you know, more is sometimes more you lose sort of the attention of what you get from something when the more you listen to it. I've always been making records like that where it's like they're designed for listen one and designed for listen like a million. Like they're supposed to like shift and change.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, the fact that we have access to so much, it creates option paralysis, which, I mean, I've talked about before in other contexts, you know, music making contexts. I mean, you know, before we move on to another question quickly, I guess I'd want to ask you just to get that, because I think it would be interesting to get your perspective on this. Do you ever feel that technologically as a producer that, like, you know, through all the various DAWs and VSTs, and I'm sure the plethora of equipment that you have access to, like, that you're ever frozen because you don't know what sound or what piece to start with, because you could start with almost anything?
Well, I don't use soft synths. I mean,
Analog boy.
Analog boy in a digital world. Yeah. That's not a reference that anyone's going to get, but I love you. Yeah, that shit you learn. You look, producing records and writing records, you can have all your tools set out and you can learn all these things that can get you there a little quicker, but you're chasing something that is so much bigger than any crap you have. And, you know, I don't know, you don't need that many things around, you know, you just need things that, you know, and you can freak out and make you feel interesting. But yeah, you know, I don't use soft synths. I don't use too much MIDI. We're just kind of printing everything as we go. So if it feels cool, then we're moving from there.
I also saw a few people, and myself, were not to say it required too much digging, but we, you know, also saw this studio site that you're running where you have all of these like download packs of like samples and loops, like from various Bleachers songs.
Some are Bleachers songs, some are just shit I've been making at Electric Lady. Because one day I was in here and I was like, this place is sick, and I'm running all this shit through all this crazy tape, and it was during the pandemic. I was like just trying to figure out some like tiny way to brighten someone else's day, and I thought, you know, throwing some sample packs out there, and it was awesome just hearing shit that people were throwing back at me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I mean, those are obviously still out there. Like, do you plan to come out with more of that in light of the new record coming out? And like, you know, like legally speaking, what is your own personal philosophy when it comes to people kind of using this material that you've thrown out there?
Well, I made it clear you can do whatever you want
with
it. I think there's an unspoken language on songwriters and producers, and there's like I think out there culturally people like to act like it's a thin line, but you know it's a thick line. I put that shit out and I tweeted. I said, do whatever you want, release it, it's yours. That doesn't mean someone could take one of my records and rip something off of it, you know. But there's different, you know, that it's a sample pack. It's for everybody. And I'd love to do more of that, and I'd love to. Been working on kind of even making some of my own gear in some pretty specific ways. But you just gotta get that shit super right. That's why I love those sample packs, because like they're the shit. Like I didn't throw them up there, and I wasn't giving anyone like stuff I wouldn't use. Like I put those things in songs.
Because we have a lot of fans in the audience, I got one about Kevin Abstract, who, you know, you've had a production credit with in the past, and
making Arizona Baby is like definitively wonderful experiences in my life.
Yeah, I mean, some people just want to know like what that process was like, you know, working with Ramil, working with Kevin, and I guess to further jump off of that, are there any points in the future where you may find yourself working more in a hip hop context again?
Yeah, there's a couple things I'm doing that I can't talk about because it's not mine to talk about, but Ramel and Kevin, and then Laura Sisko and yours and me, that was pretty much the team on that. There's four of us in the room, and we just like, I mean, there was an energy of just finding something fucking crazy and then pushing another level. I mean, I think that record is, you know, might finally like reach its time in like 2029. It's so future to me. Like the level of organic and like tape sounds that are happening with some of the like insane vocal arrangements with the song structures. Like it was just this kind of like moment. Didn't even take very long. I feel like it was like 2 weeks. And it was just, I could not fucking love that record more. And Ian or Kevin and Ramel are just, yeah, that's like a bright future to have guys like that out there.
You know, what you're describing there in that track itself, and just thinking about what we've been talking about, like the Strokes, the progressions music's under the music, progression music generally has undergone since then, popular music. Some of the records that famously you've been involved with, like, the recent Taylor Swift records and so on and so forth. Artists of the indie set are no stranger to popularity. Obviously, there's been a lot of mainstream artists over the years, but do you feel like slowly over this course of time, there's been almost like an indie-fication of the mainstream, like indie aesthetics becoming more and more popular? And in a way, do you feel like on some of the records that you've been involved in, like you've been a vehicle for that?
Well, it's weird because I don't know. The concept of indie is really a weird one for me.
It's very umbrella. It's very vague.
It's just because of the generation I grew up in. I mean, like when I was coming up, the glory of the '90s were happening, and it was just, at least maybe it's because I was a kid and there was a lack of cynicism, but I just remember like you fucking hear Weezer, Indigo Girls, Snoop, Green Day, all on pop radio, and you're like, what the fuck is going on?
That's
like
true.
I mean, Outkast was happening, and Melissa Etheridge was happening, and Toad the Wet Sprocket was happening, and fucking Civ was happening, and Rollins Band was oddly big. It was a really weird time.
Yeah.
And it was a really magical time, and it wasn't because I was young, which is something I didn't realize till recently. I was like, no, that actually was a fucking moment. That's why everyone's trying to make it happen again through their genes, like. And then this shit happened where rap metal comes and sort of destroys the world and makes popular music like it's sort of like Trumpism, where it's like, wait a second, like there's that many people out there that like this? What the fuck? It was just crazy. And
so was rap metal like this asteroids killing the dinosaurs moment in a way?
100% was.
Wow.
We were just like, I remember like, like you go to the mall and everyone liked Smashing Pumpkins. And it's like, that is cool. You go to the mall and everyone liked fucking Warren G. That is cool. Like everyone liked Outkast and Nirvana, and you're like, yeah, the world's cool. And then all of a sudden everyone liked shit that I really didn't fuck with, and a lot of people I know didn't, and we were like, what? It was almost like from my like white Jewish town, like this like explosive like what? like first signs of like this shit sucks. What is wrong with everyone?
There's some awful stuff, but what about Slipknot though? Slipknot?
I love Slipknot. I'm not talking about Slipknot.
Yeah, no, there's
Slipknot.
Well, but the thing is like,
you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but there's almost like some good bands that came out of it, but then there's like a million like awful derivative bands.
The genre of great band of bad genre is a fascinating one. Rage Against the Machine.
Sure.
Brilliant band, bad genre. Best example, fucking Sublime, man.
That's
Sublime
true too.
Is the shit. They're so good. It is a very tough genre. Whereas if we were talking about alt country or I don't know, fucking like, house music or jazz, it's great music within all this. Sublime is more, like. But so then I remember this thing. I'm getting a little older, and it's like, okay, so everyone's mad. The radio sucks. MTV sucks. Everything's shit. And now we're gonna splinter off. And now it's all about local shows and at the drive-in. And all these fucking rules, all these rules that keep you away from this bad place. You can't sign to this label. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't dress like this. You got to be vegan, blah, blah, blah. And then the Strokes are happening. There's all these rules, what you can and can't do. And it birthed this. I'm so happy I came up right before it because it's a rough time, man. Rough time to, you don't want rules. And then it kind of got a little better for a minute. And then, but the point is this. I don't have this part of me that sees like this music or that music. Because when I was coming up, it was just sort of this like, it's just all out there. I remember going to fucking radio shows and literally seeing Melissa Etheridge into Hole. And it was like, what is happening? And it was just, that was my gamut.
Well, I mean,
but I guess that's a far fucking distant point from what you asked, which is, am I shepherding indie into mainstream or something? And I guess the answer is sure. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I
really like.
I think you honestly want to make me ask another one now that you've like literally taken me down memory lane there with every fucking artist that I ever loved or listened to on the radio from a childhood until now. And I guess I wanted to ask you, do you feel like despite the algorithmic sanitization of everything, do you feel like we're currently moving into another weird era?
Oh, we're in the best fucking place. the future is so bright for music and so bad for the planet, but so bright for music, which is just like the thing that all these herbs
the
didn't
planet's
realize.
burning the fuck down, but at least
Yeah, but the music is
the
gonna
music's gonna be good.
which is a little bit how it's been historically. If you look at great cultural moments,
Sure.
it's like, I mean, come on, you don't think that the next couple of years are going to be some of the best touring years in the history of public performance?
Yeah, I mean, if tours can come back with a vengeance, no, I agree.
If they can come back at all, I mean, it's just going to be magical. It's all of a sudden it's fragile.
But not even in terms of touring, but just like in terms of the records that are coming out, because there have been a lot of records coming out of the mainstream lately that, even to reference back to the Taylor Swift thing, that stylistically and aesthetically have thrown a lot of fans for a loop. Like, nobody saw this record coming. Nobody saw this change in sound coming. Nobody saw this other artist coming out with the best record of their career. It seems like there's, again, despite the algorithms and despite how soul sucking all of that can be, there's a lot of unpredictability right now. And I feel that even as somebody,
I have so much joy about
I feel that even as somebody who is talking about and covering records all the time, because like announcements behind album releases are shorter. When the album drops, nobody knows how the fuck any of it's going to sound. And it seems like there's way more of an unpredictability factor than there might have been at one time.
Well, you can't game it anymore, and it's wonderful. It's why like TikTok is ironically a very good thing for music, because you can't control it.
Yeah.
Which is like, you fucking Fleetwood Mac song might work.
I literally did. We have a Patreon where we ask our viewers, and a lot of them are younger than me, to pick an album that we all just kind of like do a little classic stream powwow around, and they asked for Rumors. And I don't know what it is, but like the Zoomers fucking love Fleetwood Mac. And look, my mom loved Fleetwood Mac. My stepdad loves Fleetwood Mac, and I grew up listening to Fleetwood Mac songs, and Fleetwood Mac songs were always on oldies radio back in the day. Like Fleetwood Mac is
Fleetwood Mac is really, really good.
Yeah.
And that's
but then it's like there seemed like there was this span of time as millennials got older where maybe we didn't value them as much as we should have been, and then all of a sudden it's the Zoomers coming up from behind. They're like, no, Fleetwood Mac's fucking awesome. that and fucking Steely Dan. They love the fuck out of Steely Dan and Fleetwood Mac.
Steely Dan's having a real moment. Yeah. Steely Dan was always a little icy for me, just lyrically. Like I always like was sort of looking at Donald Fagen, just be like, but who are you? We know you're like a bad motherfucker who like knows some bad women and does some bad coke, but like a little more. That's just a personal stylistic thing. Like I think Steely Dan is a little bit for people who want to try something on, feel themselves. It's totally cool. I'm just looking for more like the cup of coffee conversation.
I agree. But the thing is, like, growing up to be the age that we are and growing up under the generation that we did, there was almost like a certain hierarchy of that era of groups and bands and who was the best and who wasn't. That was almost like forced upon us. And now, now that seems almost like flipped over, because now it's almost like a point of pride for a lot of Zoomers to be like, I don't give a fuck about the Beatles. Fuck the Beatles. And it's like, okay, if you feel that way.
Well, it's also like, you look back at a time, you look back at the history of like even something like Rolling Stone and how few people were actually in control and how much it mattered. And they could literally be like, this is the thing, this is not the thing. And we've just drifted out of that time period. And ironically, for all their algorithmic stuff, what the moment we've reached is you can't game anything. Like I remember not that long ago, like you could labels could like take a record and they could like jam it down pop radio and they could jam it into a single.
Yeah, how the fuck do you think the swing revival happened? How else does the swing, to talk about the chaos of the 90s, how the fuck else does the swing revival happen without labels just being like, you know what, let's jam this down everyone's throat?
And was the Gap commercial first, or was it a reaction? Like, was it Squirrel Nut Zippers into Gap commercial?
Oh, I forget. Was
worth noting. Yeah. But it's just, I've noticed it. I've never really, look, I learned good lessons early on, which is sort of like, you don't want to get successful for something that you don't absolutely adore. So I've never just not done anything that I just didn't love and feel like should be out there. But I can feel the tide shifting if I'm just even meet some like herbs here or there, and sort of they're like, it's the same thing that would happen with politics. Like all of a sudden it's good for business to be hyper creative. So your reaction could be, fuck you, where were you 2 years ago? Or it could be like, all right, cool.
I guess to get your thoughts on one more, I guess, perceived paradigm shift. And, this is something I obviously have to address that. I'm sure you've heard a million times that you work with a lot of women. You make music with a lot of female pop stars and so on and so forth.
You seem embarrassed to be asking the
Oh
question.
yeah, because everybody points to that. Everybody points to that. But I wanted to ask you something a little bit more substantive than just simply pointing that out.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's that. I mean, I feel like currently we're also kind of going through a reckoning of understanding how much women have been a driver in the music industry, and despite that, how little power and sort of influence they've really had to show for it, especially in light of people like Britney Spears and, the whole Free Britney movement, and, sort of seeing like what she went through over the course of her career, being at, the height of popularity that she was. And, contrasting that with now and the artists that you work with, do you feel like women have more control and agency when it comes to their own artistic destiny today than they might have had at one time? And, are you doing your own part in kind of, I guess, being an accessory to that creatively?
I only know my world, and these people that I work with are some of the great geniuses of our time. So there's the Britney thing is interesting because it's really easy to write a think piece, prosecuting the way we reacted in the 90s, early 2000s. It's a lot harder to put it in the bone. And sometimes I wonder, it's like cool. Like I agree with you that like, it's obvious that like that treatment was insane and we deserve to examine that. But like, consider that now. I almost feel like in the same breath, this is not the question you asked, but I'll get to it. In the same breath, it's sort of like, reconsidering and prosecuting the way we culturally treated Britney, and at the same time doing the same shit to someone else.
Yeah.
That will only take another 10 years to figure out. It's like, can't we just fucking have like the final conversation about getting past like an insanely commerce-driven, celebrity-driven, gossip-driven fucking culture without having to do this like weird dance? Like we all get it now. So it kind of pisses me off in that sense, just because I see a lot of shit, which maybe plays into your question.
No, I think it's exactly the point, because as you say, it's easy to sort of make that observation about something that happened in the past, but are we making the social alterations today to make sure that that's not happening right now? And I guess the answer to that is not really, like sort of maybe.
I mean, I wouldn't want to speak for anyone else, and my process is so other. If I'm making a record with Lon, I'm sitting alone with me, her, and Laura. Same thing with Ella or Taylor or Kevin or Sam Dew or any of these people. We're alone in a room. It's very outside of shit. What I do know is that those people should tell that story, however, because they've lived it and I haven't. But we are back to almost a 1950s model of fucking artists. And that's something that's like worth looking at. That's a lesson we never fucking learned. And it's one that is like, I've been on my mind a lot. It's just like, as like the music industry crests into like a new peak, it's like, why is it always the artist, the last one to be considered? And I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about the kid who's growing up somewhere, who's like, I'm an artist, and everyone in their community is like, cool, now pick a real job. Because that's the problem, right? So when you don't pay artists, when you don't make it possible, do you know the metrics about how big you have to be on tour to make a living? Like why can't that be
Spotify?
On Spotify, why can't that be honest work? And it's not about successful artists getting richer. It's about, if you make that honest work and you actually pay artists what they deserve, then you create entire generations of people. And you see this in Canada or France or some places where there's a little bit more government involvement or some more fairness. You create a generation of people who say, I want to be an artist. And that's met the same way someone saying like, I want to be an architect or a cook or something. And look, I was lucky. I grew up and I was supported, but it was fucking hard to stay on that path, because there's so much noise around you being like, good fucking luck. You'll never have a house. You'll never have anything. You'll never have anything. And it's really sad. And so when I see issues like this, whether it's like big streaming services screwing artists, promotion companies screwing artists, the fact that when you're on tour, everyone's got their hand in except the artist, right? we all know everyone kind of loses money on tour and then makes it up somewhere. It just fucks some generation of people that should be getting paid to do that kind of honest work. And it's indoctrination. They do it too. They say as an artist, well, you're lucky to be here. Don't fucking ask for more.
Yeah.
And it's in all of us. It is in me, man. It is in me to be like embarrassed every time I'm like, wait a second, how did we not get paid to be here? Like, you know, like, because you're just like, you're lucky to be here. You're living dreams, so fuck you. And it's a real weird system. That's not your question, but it was on my mind.
No, I think it's a great answer. And, you know, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but, you know, because of everything's kind of coalesced into this era of content that we're living into, you know, that we're living in. I talk with people that make video content and they have discussions with me about like, agencies or brands they're working with and so on and so forth. And sometimes I have to remind them just like how much they're getting fucked over, or like you need to. Well,
the easiest way to fuck someone over is to blow their mind with how, you know, that's the problem. I'll say it a different way. We don't have a systemic issue with artists or creative people having their hand too much in the pot. Think about it, right? It's the tech people, it's people labels on the other side of it. That's where people, you know, and it's just, yeah, you look at so many things, like you look at like service charges, and you're like, what is that? Why is secondary marketing ticketing legal? Why? And you're actually looking for an answer. You call your manager and say, hey, I just put a show on sale and the whole show sold out. And there's 500 tickets on these websites for like 9 times what they're selling for. Like literally, like from a childlike point of view, why is that legal? And there's no fucking answer. It's because there's some fucking asshole who's just like, because they can, because artists will just go back to the studio and go back on tour. They're frying bigger fish. They're very easy people to fuck, clearly. And it's, yeah, it's just fascinating.
I think we need to have you on for a part 2 at some point. Just to have
was I supposed to talk about my record?
Industry rants with Jack
Hey,
Antonoff.
Anthony, there was no fucking spicy shit talk in the comments or something. I feel like you have such like a exciting audience. I was hoping to like
we try to make the audience behave during the whole thing, but
really?
It says, Jack, we love you. Yay, Jack. I mean Fantano. Yeah. So somebody, I don't know what they said something about feeding into it with Lana and Taylor, but I don't know what they're in reference to.
I don't either.
Maybe they think that I hate Lana and Taylor or something. Somebody said not the women question for the millionth time, which I know I brought that up, but I wasn't going that direction.
Yeah, but you know what I'll say? I'll say that it was an interesting pivot.
I wasn't like trying to ask specifically honestly, that question.
You know, I'll be honest with you. The question that bugs me is the like, what you didn't ask, but like, you're so busy. The working with women doesn't bother me because I think it's a good thing. I just don't have an answer because it was never something I set out. I just go to the studio and I work and I find these collaborations through really sort of happenstantial or organic means. And I don't know. I almost feel like it's for someone else to answer.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't look at the people. I guess the reason that question doesn't come to mind, or I find that personally be an annoying question, is because I feel like framing it in that way is almost to say, like, oh, look at Jack Antonoff doing a charity for the women, just always working with the women and doing them a favor. And it's like, no, these. Yeah,
you're right. There is a level of bullshit. Yeah. Like no one's, I don't think anyone would say to like any other producer, like, you work with a lot of great dudes. Yeah. like let's talk about that. Like, what's it like being around men? There is an inherently shitbird quality to it, but I don't know. I don't have a hot take on it. I guess there's a cultural significance. I guess it could mean this or that, but I'm really like, not something like a herb, but just like focused on the quality of the records and nothing else.
Yeah. No. And I get the sense that you are. And I feel like, frankly, that's I don't know, that's not to suck your dick. I sucked mine. I don't want to suck yours.
You said you were going to do nothing.
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. But at least there are some people out there who I see missing it but I do see a vast difference in a lot of the albums that you work on, even if like some of the records recently have taken a bit of a mellow tone. And some of those records that you've done have been some of my favorites this year. And when I think about something like the last couple of Taylor records versus like the new St. Vincent record, I mean, to me, those albums are on completely different planets, as you were just kind of saying.
Yeah, that's how I feel. So I always, if I ever see something that is like doesn't understand that, I typically wonder if they're hearing the work because it's so like, yeah, I mean that last record with Annie, man, like I was making sounds that I've never heard before. Just like going nuts.
I agree, man. I mean that album blew my mind. It's one of my favorite records of the year.
Yeah, me too. I love that album so much.
It's so good.
I think we're lucky to be alive during her time.
And you know, as you were saying, like there are sounds on that record that I think are super groundbreaking and creative, but it's so refreshing considering just like how old school and vintage a lot of it sounds. And
yeah, there's a path to the future through the past. Always, you just got to find it the right way and not, make it pastiche in a sense.
No, I think that's a good way to put it. I think it's a good way to put it. I like that. I like that energy.
This was nice. I think people think you're maybe more of a shark or something.
Yeah, no, people assume I'm evil because, I don't tell anyone what they want to hear if I'm not feeling a record or whatever. I'm straightforward about how I feel about a certain record or whatever, but person to person, I'm kind guy.
Okay.
And not that I assumed anything else, but you were quite nice as well. Thank you for coming on, Jack. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It's you took my mind off. Just nice to talk and not just sit and think about putting out an album. So it's really nice.
It's out in a couple hours. So sweat those hours out. We'll see you later.